Hi there, welcome to another video from Hegarty Maths. It's Mr. Hegarty here, and we are changing the subject of the formula, our first video on that topic. To start with, something I need you super good at for this particular skill. I need you to be able to solve simple one-step equations and solve for x. Pause the video and double check you can do that. So I would have expected you to get the following. Now, if you don't know how to do that, this particular video is going to be too difficult for you. You have to go back to your building blocks. If you do know how to do that, these are the skills we're going to require for this particular video. Now, to introduce the idea of changing the subject. We've done questions like this before. Given that a is equal to 3, b is equal to 5, and h is equal to 2.5, evaluate a. This was substituting into important formula. And all we did here is we said a is a half. We substituted in here a 3 and a 5, so 3 add 5, and we multiplied it by 2.5. When we did that, we got ourselves that is 8. A half multiplied by 8 is 4, and 4 times 2.5 is 10. And that was nice and easy. But what if we got something like this? The same formula. Okay, imagine we were using the same formula. But this time we are told a, right? We are told h as before, but we are told the value of capital A, this thing, right? And we're asked to find b, this here. Now b is not the subject of that formula. For b to be the subject of the formula, we would want a formula b equals with a's in it, with little a's in it, with h's in it, and numbers and operations. So we want to actually rearrange this so b is the subject of the formula. And that is what we're building up to, making another variable the subject of a formula and then substituting into that rearranged formula. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build up our complexity by doing simple examples first so that we can eventually build up and rearrange really complicated formulae. So let's start nice and easy. I'm always going to start with a simple piece of solving equations that's exactly like the changing of the subject. So pause the video and double check you can do that. Well, I would have hoped you would have subtracted 3 off both sides. Hopefully you would have got therefore x is equal to 2. Right, it's time to use this idea to actually change the subject of the formula. So this time we're not solving, we're making x the subject in this case here. Can you see how that's similar to our solve question? Well, instead of 3 add x, we have p add x is 5. But it's the same process what we're going to do. We want, in the end, to make x the subject, we want x equals something. So we need to, what we call, isolate x. Okay, so how are we going to remove that positive p? Well, we're going to subtract p from both sides, and we get x is therefore 5 subtract p. Hey presto, x is the subject of the formula. Let's do another one. Similar idea here, but instead of that 5, I'm going to call that a q. So p add x is equal to q. How am I going to solve this? Pause the video if you think you can make x the subject of the formula. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the p off both sides just as we did before, and therefore I'm going to get myself that x is equal to q subtract p. And there you go, x is the subject of the formula. And as you can see, it's almost identical to solving equations, it's just you've got other variables and letters there, but the same idea applies. Right, let's do another one. Pause the video and double check you can do this one. Hopefully you would have added 1 to both sides, and you would have got yourself the answer that x is equal to 6. I bet you can guess what I'm going to do now. Make x the subject of this formula. Instead of having a 5 there, I've got p. What am I still going to do to make x the subject? Well, I'm still going to undo that subtract 1 by adding 1 to both sides. And x as the subject of the formula is going to be p add 1. You could have written it as 1 add p as well, because addition after all is commutative. And there you go, x is the subject of the formula. And instead of taking away 1, let's just make that a piece of algebra. X subtract q is equal to p. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to add q to both sides to make x be on its own on the left hand side to isolate x, and we're going to get x is equal to p add q. And you could write it the other way around, q add p, because again addition is commutative, and we're done. Let's try another one. Can you solve that type of equation? Well, hopefully you would have said if 7x is equal to 5, I'm going to divide both sides by 7 to undo that multiplied by 7, and I'm going to get the answer x is equal to 5/7. I bet you guess what I'm going to do here. I'm going to swap that 7 for a letter. How would I make x the subject here? Well, I'm going to divide both sides by the p to get x by itself on the left hand side. After all, those p's will cancel, and I'll get myself that x is therefore 5 over p as the subject. What about the next one? Pause and make sure you can do that. Exactly like before, I'm going to divide both sides by p, and I'm going to get myself therefore that x as the subject of the formula is q over p. It's just like solving equations, guys. If you're good at solving equations, you're good at making x the subject. Let's try another one. Pause the video, solve for x. Well, I'm going to multiply both sides by 7 to undo that divide by 7, and I would have got myself the answer x is equal to 35. Now, I'm going to increase the complexity. I'm going to say make x the subject here. What are you going to do? Well, hopefully you would have thought I'm going to multiply by 7 just like before. Therefore x is equal to, a mathematician writes p multiplied by 7 as 7p, and we're done. And again, pause the video, make sure you can do that. X divided by q is equal to p. How am I going to make x the subject? Well, I'm going to multiply both sides by q to undo that divide by q there, and that will isolate x on the left hand side, and I'm going to get x is equal to pq, and I'm done. And now it's time to mix it up, not with the baby steps anymore. I'm just going to throw some questions at you and say make x the subject. So pause the video and have a go. Okay, I want x by itself on the left hand side, so I'm going to leave that x there. I just need to remove that positive 3a, so I'm going to subtract 3a off both sides, right? And what am I going to get? Well, I'm going to get therefore x as the subject, x is 2b, subtract 3a, and we're done. What about here? Well, I want that x to stay here on the left hand side but on its own, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 5a to both sides to remove that, subtract 5a, and I'm going to therefore get that x is therefore b, add 5a. I could have written 5a add b as well because addition is commutative. What about here? Well, I want x by itself on the left hand side, so I need to remove that multiply by 3v. So I'm going to divide both sides by that 3v, and I'm therefore going to get x on its own. X is therefore e plus w divided by 3v, and x is the subject of the formula. Okay, what about here? Well, I want x by itself on the left hand side, so what I need to do is I need to keep that x there. I'm dividing it by 2p at the moment, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 2p, right? That will cancel the 2p dividing on the left hand side and leave x on its own. And the way we usually write that, we usually write the 2p in front of the brackets like this. 2p bracket q add 3. Now there's no need to expand that bracket. No one told you to expand the bracket, but if you really wanted to, you could say it was 2pq add 6p. But you don't have to do that step. That is good enough for x as the subject of the formula. But we would always write that multiplied 2p in front of a bracket. That's mathematically correct. You wouldn't leave your answer like that. And that's it for this video, our first introduction into changing the subject of the formula. Thanks for watching.